Good evening, friends. It's Friday once again. Have you ever wondered where we store our memories? Sure, we all know in the brain somewhere, but science has not been able to pinpoint them and say, here they are. We know brain damage can cause memory loss, but what if it's not really memory loss, but rather an inability to translate the memories that are there? The brain has been likened to a computer. So what if the memories are still there, but can't be retrieved? What if memories are stored all over the body, like little flash drives, and the brain is simply the tool for reading them? Okay, enough of my rambling. Now it's time to grab a snack, dim the lights, and let me take you into the night with a story I call Blood Memories. Do you believe in genetic memory? Max asked as he dropped chunks of fish into the box. You mean like memories stored in our genes and passed down to the next generation? Sam watched as Max closed the box with the fish and hosed it off. Our genes carry specific genetic memories about our environment so we can adapt. Much like how the body knows people in northern environments need less melanin in their skin than those in the south. But actual living memories of what we did? No. Max wound the hose back on its holder on the wall and hit a button which submerged the box into the holding tank along with two others, exposing a large number 2 painted on the wall of the tank below the water's surface. Each box had a different color. One box was blue, the next red, and the third was yellow. The fish was in the yellow box. Sam watched as Max looked first at the boxes, then to the grates on either side of the tank. Presumably, the grates led to the adjacent tanks, so they all shared the same water. I do believe we store our memories in our genes, Max said as he opened the door and led Sam into the next room where there was another tank. This tank also contained 3 colored boxes. My studies with these sharks lead me to believe that not only do we store our memories in our DNA, but it's retrievable. We just haven't figured it out how to access it. I have not seen any evidence of this in my studies, Sam stated. As a neurophysicist, I've studied the brain and blood to the molecular level and have not seen anything to indicate this is possible. Have you been able to identify memories in brain tissue samples? Max asked. No, but we believe memories are related to electron alignment within the neurons. There are widely varying patterns of electron alignment within the brain, and in fact, in cells thought responsible for memories. There are no 2 alignment patterns alike, which supports this theory. Interesting, Max said as he put chunks of fish into the blue box and lowered the boxes into the water to expose a large number 3 painted on the tank wall. Again, he looked first at the boxes and then to the grates. Follow me back to the control room. I want to show you something. They walked back the way they came, through tank room 2 and into the control room where the tank was numbered 1. Unlike the other rooms, this room had no boxes mounted on the wall, but rather they were sitting on a bench with the cables from a lift connected to them. Going to the boxes, Max opened the blue one and poured a few ounces of motor oil in a glass tube within before closing it again. Next, he opened the red box and poured a thick black sludge into the glass tube there. Finally, he pricked his finger with a needle and placed a few drops of blood on a small dish within the box. Grabbing the lift control, he moved the 3 boxes over the tank and lowered them until the small cords hanging from them were touching the water. Then, he pushed a button on the wall to open a grate at the end of the tank. This grate led to the large holding pool that they had passed on their way into the facility. I had a good friend who was doing marine research in the Caribbean. He had traps and monitoring stations spread across 4 islands, which he checked every day in the same order. I used to tease him that he wasn't working, but rather using research grants to finance an extended permanent vacation. He cast a glance at the opening to the holding pool and watched a very large shark swim into the tank where it circled lazily. Turns out, I was right, as this guy here put an end to his vacation. "This shark killed your friend?" Sam asked. No, but he did take off an arm, which effectively ended his career as a diving marine biologist. He works in Florida now at a marine research institute. Max walked closer to the edge of the tank and stared at the shark. But it was his accident that got me interested in memory studies. Let me guess, Sam said with no attempt to hide his sarcasm. You keep the shark here and have your friend visit to see if the fish remembers how good he tastes. In a way, yes, Max said matter of fact. You see, I was with him when the accident happened, and what I saw amazed me. We began the day at Alpha Site, documenting the fish and shark populations there, and were about to leave when this big guy showed up. David got all excited and couldn't stop jabbering on about a once-in-a-lifetime find when he saw the shark. You see those two knobs sticking out of his side above the pectoral fins? Yeah, some kind of malignancy. That's what we thought. Max sat at the edge of the pool. We didn't have the equipment with us to catch him, but we did have a radio transmitter tag. So David tagged the fish with the plan to catch him later and examine the anomaly. In his excitement, David almost tagged himself and ended up with a mean puncture wound to his hand. Despite bleeding profusely, he refused to let me bandage the wound until after the fish was tagged. After we tagged him, we fixed his hand up, got in the Jeep, and drove to the other side of the island to Bravo Site. Now mind you, it had been almost 2 hours since we tagged this big shark, and we were preparing to leave Bravo Site when I looked out and saw a big shark in the lagoon. I pointed it out to David, prompting him to comment that we should note conditions for the day, because it was odd to see large sharks like this in the shallows during the day. Usually these big predators only come out at night, or when they are extremely hungry, but we saw 2 that morning. The rest of the day went pretty much as usual. We made our rounds of his sites, taking a boat to the other islands to remote sites, and at the end of the day, we loaded up the diving cage to check out the reefs. Max looked at him seriously. This was David's pattern, you see. Every day he made the rounds, and in the evening he went to the reefs in a diving cage to count the white-tipped shark population. Max got up from the edge of the pool and hit a button on the lift control. A small click was heard, and the motor oil began to trickle down to the water along one of the cords. The shark didn't seem to notice. He hadn't been down for more than 5 minutes when I saw this big guy come rocketing out of the shadows toward the cage. I didn't even have time to warn David over the intercom, but hit the winch controls from instinct. That shark hit the aluminum cage so hard, it rammed through the viewport and was attacking David. By the time I got the cage back on the boat, with the shark still stuck within, David's arm was gone, presumably swallowed by the shark, and the shark had him by the leg. I got him out of the cage and on the deck where I could apply tourniquets as the captain made for the harbor. To make a long story short, after David was taken care of at the hospital, I went back to the boat to examine the anomalies on the shark. Max hit the control again, allowing the crude oil to begin dispersing into the water. Within seconds, the shark was swimming around agitated. Would you believe that after several hours laying on the deck of the boat, tangled in the cage, this big bastard was still alive? Unbelievable. I got him off the boat and transferred to the holding pool where we could study him, but when he got out of the hospital, David seemed to have lost interest completely and flew back to the mainland. Watch him now. He's about to make his move. The shark seemed to suddenly tense and rocketed across the tank and attacked the cords soaked in crude oil. When he did, the bottom of the box opened, spilling the blood into the water. Why did he go for the crude oil? Sam asked. How did he know to find blood with the crude? That was my question as well, Max said, and led him into the next room with holding tank 2. I had spilled a little crude in the holding pool while David was in the hospital, and the shark's reaction got me to thinking that somehow this big guy associated crude oil with food. I experimented a bit, and regular motor oil and gasoline had no effect, which leads me to believe that at some point this shark had been around a drilling rig or other source of crude, and the food was abundant. It wasn't long after that I started thinking about how he'd attacked David only hours after being tagged, and came with the idea that the shark was simply pissed at having being injured and came for revenge. But how did he know that a guy in a cage was the guy who tagged him? Surely he couldn't see his face with the mask and breather. Sam seemed doubtful. I asked the same questions, Max responded. The only thing I could figure was that some of David's blood got into the water through his bandages, and the shark remembered it because David was bleeding when he tagged the fish. Okay, it seems like a bit of a stretch to think a fish could identify a person simply by the smell of his blood, but I can buy that considering dogs find people by smell all the time. Sam now looked thoughtful. But how did he know where to find him? Didn't you say you had traveled all day and were at reefs miles away? Yeah, we were about 25 miles away on the other side of several islands, in fact. Max looked at Sam straight in the eye. The only way that fish could have known where we were was by reading David's memories in the blood. His blood was all over the tag's barbed shaft, and I think it got in the fish's bloodstream where somehow the fish was able to figure out where David was going to be the rest of the day. That's preposterous, Sam exclaimed. Then how do you account for the shark showing up at the lagoon a couple hours after it was tagged, and then at the reef just in time to eat his arm? Max seemed pleased with himself. You mean to say that the shark has found a way to read memories from blood and translated this information in order to get his revenge for having been injured? Sam seemed incredulous. Exactly, Max said. But I have begun to wonder, since seeing the shark's reaction to crude oil, if the shark wasn't after revenge, but actually just doing what sharks do naturally. What is that? Sam asked curiously. Cleaning up the wounded, Max answered. They are nature's cleaners, keeping the oceans free of carrion and wounded animals. It comes naturally to them. I don't believe sharks have emotions. What you say makes sense, but I'm still having a hard time believing this fish was able to read memories from blood. Sam reconfirmed his opinion. Maybe this will change your mind, Max said, and hit a button on the wall. The grates separating the tanks opened, and almost immediately the shark came in. He circled the tank once, stopping in front of the boxes as if to look at the grates, and then immediately turned and hit the yellow box, releasing the fish. After eating the fish, the shark swam immediately to the gate to Tank 3 as Max and Sam moved quickly through the door to follow. Again, the shark circled the tank once, stopping in front of the boxes to look at the position of the grates, before turning and hitting the blue box this time to release the fish. After eating the fish, the shark seemed to calm down and swam in a relaxed manner back to Tank 2. What do you think about that? Max asked, smiling. Honestly, I can't believe what I just saw, Sam said, following Max back to the control room where the shark was exiting to the holding pool. What about the anomalies on his sides? Were they cancer? You know, there's a low incidence of cancer in sharks, which makes them extremely interesting to science as we search for a cure, so I was curious about that too. Max replaced the boxes to the workbench and put oil soak under to catch the oil. I thought maybe this fish would help provide some answers about that, but it wasn't cancer. Then what was it? Sam asked. Believe it or not, that shark does not have a cartilage skeleton like other sharks. Max paused. The anomalies are bone spurs, growing directly from the spine and an ossified skeleton. Wait a minute. Sam seemed confused. Other than the bone spurs, as you call them, this fish looks like an ordinary sand tiger shark. The definition of sharks is that they have a cartilage skeleton and only real bones in their whole body are teeth and jaws. That's correct. Max turned to look at him. What we have here is a completely new species of shark with the ability to not only read memories of men from their blood, but understand what it sees and possessing an ossified skeleton. But as frightening as those facts are, they pale into comparison to what I suspect. There's more? Sam was having trouble accepting what he had seen with his own eyes. He himself had caught and released many sharks in his life, and the idea that they may have read his memories from simple blood contact was appalling. Max opened a drawer at the workbench and handed Sam a drawing and an x-ray of the shark. Have a look there and tell me what you see. Sam seemed to study the drawings for a moment, and his face became deadly pale as he handed them back. You've got to destroy that fish. Max put the pages back in the drawer and led the way outside. I'm sorry to say, Sam, destroying that fish won't do much good. But you have to, Sam stammered. Did you see the hollow bones and the fact that the spurs resemble the first joint of a bird's wing? Have you considered that it's already demonstrated an ability to live out of the water for long periods of time? If this species is allowed to continue to evolve, it could very well mean the end of the human race. Max stopped walking as they came to another holding pool outside the facility. He'd already considered everything Sam was saying and more. Nature was fine-tuning its finest predator, making it even more lethal, and there was nothing short of killing the planet to stop them. It was a scary thought. Flying sharks. Looking at the tank before him, he heard Sam gasp when he realized there were a dozen more of the shark species in this tank. Well, I hope you enjoyed that and it gave you a little something to think about. There's also a few hints here as to an upcoming novel I'm working on called Sherigan's Ascent. The first chapter of that book I'm working on is the last chapter of Tides of Evolution. So if you really want to know what's going on, there's a place to find out. Well, that's all I have for y'all this week, folks. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back again next week with another tale just for you. So until then, sleep well.